Three-time Pro Bowler, 15 years in the NFL. It was interesting last night. I watched over the weekend. Jalen Hurts looked a little frantic. Kyler looked a little frantic. And it's like, yeah, of course. Stafford's been around longer. Brady's been around longer. Mahomes been around longer. And it is different, Carson. Look, these playoff quarterbacks, the young ones, the game goes faster. You just think football's always fast. But I watched Kyler last night, and he looked frantic, to me anyway.
Yeah, he looked frantic. He looked uncomfortable. And more importantly, he looked gun-shy. There were a number of times where number one read was open, and he cocked his arm to throw it and pulled the ball down. And here's one right here in the end zone where he's getting ready to throw it and just got gun-shy. He wanted that's unfortunately the thing that happens to younger quarterbacks in the spotlight is you want to see that receiver come open in the playoffs. And you don't have that opportunity. You don't have that ability. You need to throw it before he's open. And unfortunately, it cost them last night, and it was really unfortunate for the Cardinals.
It's interesting. Cincinnati well. We forget sometimes, like, players get better in season. Like, Mac Jones was way better in November than September. And I look at Joe Burrow, and I'm like, he was getting into a really bad stretch of, that Chicago game of ugly throws. And then, like, he's kind of moved out of it. And the last 3 or 4 times I have watched him against Kansas City this weekend, I mean, it feels like, honestly, Carson, I'm watching a quarterback that's like literally moving into his peak. I mean, can you sense that he's literally in season, feels like he's taken a step?
Absolutely. He looks like he's in year 8. He plays calm. He plays cool. He never feels like you watch Kyler play and then you watch Joe Burrow play, and it's like watching an NFL guy and a non-NFL guy. I mean, Joe is cool and calm. He understands when he needs to take a sack and not flip it up in the air and try to make something, happen at the last second. He understands the duration of the game, and he's going to have another opportunity and another chance to make that play when he does just eat one and throw it out of bounds or take that sack. He's playing well beyond his years right now at the right time for the Cincy Bengals.
It's interesting, Carson, when you came out of college, you looked and played like a number one pick. Okay, you were big, you had a big arm, people forget this, you could move. And then there are quarterbacks that are obviously good enough to play in this league. Jimmy Garoppolo, obviously good enough. He's a professional athlete, he can win games. But there are times he doesn't drive the ball down the field, he's not going to move around a lot. And it's funny. I thought he didn't get the respect he deserved for they literally drafted his replacement. And he was a grown-up the whole year. I think that's a lot harder. If Fox brought in my replacement for the next 2 years and I'm supposed to mentor him, take me to that. You know how hard this is in this league. You at one point said, get me out of Cincinnati. You know that environment matters. It was not an ideal environment for San Francisco. Are you a little surprised the Lance Garoppolo thing went as well as it did?
No, because like you said, Jimmy's a pro. At the end of the day, Jimmy wasn't a top 3 or 4 pick. He had to squeak his way into the league. He didn't get drafted in the first round. It took him until the second. And now he's been prepared for this youngster that got drafted at number 3 all offseason long before the draft. They were talking about trading for Aaron Rodgers and Russell Westbrook, and there was chatter. So he wasn't surprised that they were going to draft somebody. But Jimmy, at the end of the day, Jimmy plays for a great coordinator. Just watch that opening drive. You watch the opening drive in that game where they went down and got 7 points. Jimmy really didn't have to do a lot. Jimmy didn't have to throw any incredibly challenging throws or difficult reads. There was a lot of runs. There was some screens. There was some nakeds. And then you watch in the Tampa game, another great coordinator in Byron Leftwich. Tampa went right down the field, but Brady was throwing challenging balls. He was throwing very challenging reads, getting down the field, throwing the ball over the defensive head. And you just notice that in the coaching. It's 2 great coaches in Tampa and obviously in San Francisco. But the level of expectation and the trust that Tom Brady has is totally different than the level of trust that Jimmy Garoppolo has in San Francisco.
I want to ask you about 2 quarterbacks now. Their season's over. Let's start with Dak. If you would have been, let's say, because you could move, somebody called the quarterback draw with 14 seconds left. Dak did have, he's earned the right to say, no, we're not doing that. 14 seconds. I said this yesterday, Carson. God, if it runs perfectly, you're left with about 1.5 seconds to 2. is there any blame for Dak not just saying, hey, we've practiced this. You need 18 seconds. I'm going to call this thing off. What did you make of the whole moment?
At the end of the day, it just comes down to situational football. Situational football is something that every great coach practices a sixth or seventh of the practice. So on a Wednesday practice, you have a certain amount of time dedicated to situational football. And this play was textbook situational football. They unfortunately ran it with 14 seconds and they needed 16. But Dak is so ingrained in situational football practice during the week that they've run it so many times and it worked so many times in practice. Unfortunately, they had to learn that in the playoffs at the very end of the season that play actually needs 16 seconds. But Dak's in the heat of it as a quarterback. When that play comes in, you've practiced it a million times. Everybody on offense knows. They know to get lined up. They know to get set. They understand the situation. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. The ref ran into him. But in no way do I put that on Dak. That's on the head coach.
So I got to ask you about Derek Carr. So there's this thing in the NFL. We've seen it before that an interim coach comes in and the team has a pop. Dan Campbell in Miami, the Raiders guy. And then you hire the guy, and he's not the guy. And Derek Carr wants them to keep their coach. And you're sitting there, if you own the Raiders, thinking, I got Dan Quinn out there. I got Harbaugh out there. I got two guys that have been to Super Bowls. And then my quarterback, he likes the guy I got the interim. That's hard. Like what? You ran the Raiders tomorrow. Do you keep the quarterback happy and maybe not get the best coach on the market? What do you do if you're the Raiders?
If you're the Raiders, you do what's best for the Raiders. And what's best for the Raiders isn't maybe necessarily what's best for Derek Carr. But Derek Carr has a couple years left. I mean, he's in his 30s. He had a nice year. He had a great start. I thought he was playing at an MVP level week 1 to 4. And then they lost Henry Ruggs. They had all the turmoil and all the distractions. And they pulled together and had a nice season. But at the end of the day, when you're the owner, that's a pretty good job. You've got a brand new stadium. You've got no state income tax to lure in free agents. You've got some draft picks. You've got you've got a really good defensive front that can stop the run. You need some more pieces. So that's a good job. That's an attractive job. At the end of the day, it's not the most attractive job because you've got Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert. But you can't worry. I mean, it's nice for Derek to stand up for his coach and give him a vote of confidence. But at the end of the day, you got to do what's best for the organization. And it's nice to hear that from Derek, but he's not the one making those decisions.
Finally, I don't think I've asked you about Lincoln Riley. You're a former Trojan. His hiring, there's obviously their transfer portal can make things turn around much quicker than, when you played. You can get 6-7 starters around the country these days. What do you make of Lincoln Riley?
Yeah, now that college football, that there's a free agency period in college football, and you can just be a one and done and go to the next place and get the next check from the next university. It's changed the landscape, and Lincoln's the right guy at the right time for the future of college football that is drastically changing. We've got a young, innovative, smart former player. He's had success. He wanted that spotlight of LA. He loved Norman and loved Oklahoma and the tradition and the history and all that. But he wanted to take his game to another level. And now he's in Los Angeles. He's in the spotlight. I think he was the perfect hire, the one out of left field that none of us saw coming, none of us expected. And I think he's the right guy at the right time.
Carson, it's great seeing you. Undisclosed location. I know where it is, but I don't tell anybody. It's just one of my favorite places on earth, and it's great seeing you.
Thanks, Colin. You too.
You bet. Carson Palmer, former Pro Bowl quarterback. Carson came out of college, and you're like, at the time, like that's what you should look like. Big, smart, tall, strong, could move, big arm. I don't think they've ever found – they've had good quarterbacks, but even USC, you don't get many of those. You don't get like – the fact that Clemson had Deshaun Watson into Trevor Lawrence, it's like, what? It's not the way it works. I mean, it's like you have John Elway, then 35 years later, you get Andrew Luck. Like it's even at these great programs, it is – you get these once in a lifetime, like perfect quarterback molds. Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from The Herd or go watch a few segments from other shows on FS1.